Good day, I'm Sanhaji Lotz and welcome to Business Report TV. I'm sitting here with Ayanda, Mdluli and Sizwe Dlamini from Independent Media, and we are discussing the PIC Commission of Inquiry. Tell me, what are your thoughts on this?
The PIC Commission of Inquiry ended on Tuesday, which is led by Judge Lex Mpati from the Supreme Court of Appeal. So, the commissioner was set up to look at instances of impropriety within the Public Investment Corporation, and it also assessed, investigated other transactions ranging in the billions in various companies across South Africa's economic landscape. So for me, what particularly stood out this week is the fact that it came to an abrupt end. And when it came to an abrupt end, the person who was testifying at the time was Jayendra Naidu. And everybody knows that Jayendra Naidu is the founder and owner of a company called Lancaster 101. Lancaster 101 was involved in a 9.4 billion rand transaction with Steinhoff International. Now, as we all know, Steinhoff International collapsed in 2017, driving the company under. And the 9.4 billion rand transaction was a hot point of contention within the PIC. You've got people such as Paul Magula, who is the Executive Director for Risk and Compliance at the Public Investment Corporation, who testified at the commission and said that particular transaction caused mayhem at the commission, particularly because Jayendra Naidu was a one-man show. He was the sole beneficiary of the 9.4 billion rand transaction. And as a result of Steinhoff going under, 5 billion rand of that 9.4 billion rand was lost, completely disappeared, wiped off the books, whatever you want to call it. So that for me, and the fact that the commissioners did not interrogate that transaction, they did not interrogate Jayendra Naidu, they did not ask him probing questions to explain what it is that exactly happened and whose interests was he really representing when, as a sole individual, went to the PIC to ask for 9.4 billion rand for only 2.7% stake. So that is a major point of contention, and that is what stood out for me this week.
Yes, and I see that it seems there was particular focus on particular individuals, particular companies. Do you think that there was perhaps a predetermined agenda?
Well, I have to say that generally, most such inquiries do have some form of agenda because they usually want to achieve something. In this case, it would be difficult for me to point out a specific agenda. What I did notice was some people were treated quite, they were scrutinized quite heavily. For example, all the Segunjala related transactions were scrutinized very, very heavily. And just like my colleague just mentioned now, a transaction that is almost twice that, even more than twice that size, was just brushed over. Like, for example, the IO transaction was about 4.3 billion. The Lancaster 101 transaction is 9.4 billion. The IO transaction, let me just put it like this, IO has hundreds, if not thousands of employees. Meanwhile, Lancaster 101 has one. Now, if you look at how these things were handled, it does. The PIC has spent more than half of its time discussing IO and Segunjala related companies.
But why do you think that is? When it comes to the former head of the PIC, Dr. Mdluli, what were your thoughts on his testimony?
Can I? Okay,
yes,
sure.
Yeah.
Look, from my side, just to add on to what Mr. Dlamini was saying right now, in terms of a predetermined outcome and putting that in contrast with Dan Majila's testimony, if you look at Dan Majila's testimony, he's implicated some very, very powerful individuals. He's implicated the likes of Malusi Gigaba. He's implicated Dr. Xolani Mkhwanazi. He's implicated Sfiso Buthelezi, who was the former Deputy Minister of Finance and the chairperson of the Public Investment Corporation. He's implicated Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who is the uncle of Sibusisiwe Zulu, who is alleged to have benefited unduly as well at the Public Investment Corporation. So in terms of what Dr. Dan Matjila was saying, about political interference and the notion of a predetermined outcome, I wouldn't think it's too far-fetched to say, look, even within the PIC itself, and when you look at the series of events that are playing themselves out at the PIC Commission of Inquiry, one cannot separate politics, from what's been happening. I mean, in the South African political landscape, for instance, we've seen other stories that have come out where there's a serious relationship between politics and money in South Africa, and I don't think the PIC as an asset manager, as a state-owned asset manager, and the PIC Commission for that fact, for that matter, is immune to that.
I mean, I'd like to ask Mr. Dlamini, what are your thoughts in regards to the James Nogu saga? Now, there have been a lot of whispers about who this potential whistleblower might be, what the agenda was. And as we know, this whistleblower did intend to specifically implicate Dr. Dan Matjila. So when we talk about politics, people and power, how do you think that comes into play with this situation?
The James Nogu saga is actually quite fun. Because I don't think it's actually just one person. Okay, if it's one person, it could be one person who initially targeted Dr. Dan Matjila, and then probably didn't get rewarded, and then targeted other executives. Because there's two sets. There's a set of emails that came out in 2017. That's when he targeted Dr. Dan, and brought in the whole Pretty Low mix-up, which was cleared by the Budlander report. And then in the second set of emails, he's no longer targeting Dr. Dan. He's now targeting the top brass at the PIC.
It seems that both sides were attacked.
Yes,
So would it then be true that this whistleblower was actually in fact two different people, or perhaps even someone within the PIC fighting to get control of the Public Investment Corporation?
It's very likely that it's one person, but what I suspect is that it's one person who just didn't get what he or she wanted. The reality is what the PIC Commission of Inquiry did towards the end, coming out to say it's probably impossible for them to be able to uncover the real identity of James Nogu. I thought that needed a little bit more attention, because earlier this year, there's a PIC employee, Simpiwe Maisela, who went and explained the whole process of what needs to be done for them to actually uncover the identity of James Nogu. And the only thing that stopped them from taking further steps was because the South African police preferred to first investigate the allegations that this guy, the whistleblower, brought to the table before they go and uncover this. Now, at the end of the PIC Commission this week, they said it's probably never going to happen. They said something about 6 investigators out there. We've sent questions to the advocate leader, so he can, sort of give us some feedback on how far they went. Chances are they're not going to reveal their investigation processes and things like that. But Maisela, he put it on the table and he explained to everybody that this is how we can actually uncover this guy.
Yes, absolutely. But now, as we know, there was so much attention placed on IO. But what about the other companies, such as VBS, Steinhoff, as mentioned earlier, Lancaster, and I believe there were about 6 other companies too that seem to have fallen to the wayside during the commission. Do you think that the commission was fair and just?
In certain instances, at the end of the day, the Commission of Inquiry is a judicial process. So according to the confines of the law in South Africa, one can argue that perhaps in terms of fairness when it comes to a certain group of companies. But we've written a number of exposés, analysis, opinion pieces, asking the questions, pieces that are out there in the open, asking why is it that it's only one set of companies, particularly black-owned companies, that are the subject of the PIC Commission of Inquiry, while white-owned companies are continuing to get away with murder. As we've seen in this commission, even from the horse's mouth, Dr. Dan Matjila himself, he has expressed that this PIC Commission has, in actual fact, only focused on black-owned companies. And with that said, and given the historical dynamics of our country, given the skewed economic direction of this country, where we're headed, where white people are still largely in control of the South African economy, and we've got major corporations and major monopolies that are in control of the South African economy. One would ask, why is the focus on black-owned companies that are, barely even scratching the surface in terms of the corporate corruption that is currently happening in this country? So to say that it's fair, it depends on which side of the fence you're sitting at. But from where I'm sitting at, as a journalist whose job is to be as impartial as they can be in what we do, I do not believe that the PIC Commission of Inquiry was fair. But I don't know, would you like to add to that?
I think the whole PIC Commission was incomplete. I wanna use that phrase rather than saying whether they're fair or not. Mainly,
Sorry, I mean, it's just like, as we know, it was continually delayed, and then it abruptly came to an end.
what happened there is that these guys came out with pretty much a very thin list, a narrowly focused list. We did that, and the advocate was not very pleased with us. But he came out with a very, very thin list, and one of the key things that they had to focus on was operations within the PIC, mostly based on media reports. Now, here's the interesting bit. We understand Iowa was in the media for a lot of times, and Lebasha was in the media a lot of times as well. And then we also had Steinhoff, which was like really seriously out there in the media as well. But they didn't seem to attend to Steinhoff. Instead, they spent a lot of time digging into these two companies, which are fully operational and, might I add, black-owned. And profitable. Yes. Now, what happens is that in Dr. Dan's statement, he goes and he raises the issue of Steinhoff, and he makes it clear to say that, listen, Steinhoff auditors need to explain to us what happened with that, because they fooled us and several other investors in this situation. Now, that is something that the PIC Commission of Inquiry should have looked into, because that was one of the biggest corporate mess-ups in this whole thing. But meanwhile, they spent all their time looking at two fully operational and profitable companies, which are black-owned.
And just to add, I mean, Steinhoff collapsed completely. Yes. 25 billion rand was wiped off the market. 25 billion. Yet the PIC Commission of Inquiry has chosen to focus on two black-owned companies, and I think there's a very, very glaring disconnect there that needs to be interrogated. And also, just to add to what Sizwe was saying as well, when he said that the commission was incomplete, I think we also Busisiwe Zulu, who's the former board member at the PIC. She was basically the one who was behind the en masse resignation of the whole entire PIC board when Tito Mboweni gave them some sort of an ultimatum. And, even with that mass resignation that happened, it puts the whole entire institution of the Public Investment Corporation into dangerous limbo, into a state of paralysis where, but she was the brains behind that, according to one of the executives who testified at the PIC Commission. And yet, with all of these instances that are happening, and then you've got the man Jayendra Naidu himself at the PIC Commission, and you do not interrogate these issues and these facts that are before us. It just goes to show, and it leaves us with questions that was the commission really fair?
It definitely seems that there was an intentional takeover of the PIC, so to say, as you said, with the likes of Sizwe Zulu, Lawrence Mdluli, and even Gungubele, coming into the picture. What do you think about this, what seems to be a very intentional takeover, where there was resignations, accusations, people getting fired? How does that affect the PIC today and what it will become in the future?
So Dr. Dan Machila made it very clear that when Malusi Gigaba, for instance, became the Minister of Finance, Sifiso Buthelezi became the chairman of the PIC. And when that happened, that was the era where the capture of the PIC started. So those are very, very big implications. And those are things that cannot be taken lightly. That Gigaba forced the PIC to accept Dr. Xolani Mkhwanazi, who was also already a director of Patela Investments, and then who came into the PIC board while Patela Investments was seeking to do business and to secure a transaction with the PIC. So I think the capture of the PIC had been long coming. The enablers of it, obviously, people put in the executives and the people who are going to back them into positions of influence. But obviously, when a new dispensation comes in, or when a new administration rather comes in, then you get the likes of Mondli Gungubele who enter the fray. And as we know with my dear colleague, that Gungubele is responsible for a lot of fumblings, and in fact the reason why one of the key reasons why the PIC finds itself in this position today, it's partly because of the actions that were taken by Mondli Gungubele at the time.
Mr. Dlamini, I have a question for you. As we know, the PIC Commission of Inquiry has come to an end. However, a week before they wrapped up the inquiry, they adjourned to re-look at the evidence. Now, do you think that this is something that will impact the report that is being compiled?
The one thing is that, look, the processes within the PIC itself, or rather PIC Commission of Inquiry, is their processes, or why they want to take a second look at the evidence that they had, review the evidence and things like that, is really their processes. I wouldn't really want to, sort of comment much on that. However, it does make sense for them to actually make that kind of decision, to say, look, let's take a closer look at the evidence. Because the one thing is that the media has actually raised a lot of questions. And it wasn't just the media, it was media and unions, as well as several business councils that have raised the questions to say, look, guys, we can see that you guys are going this direction. We've heard enough about this. What we want to hear is more about that. Yes. For example, just now you guys were discussing about a suspected takeover of the PIC. Yes. If you look at it carefully, that is one of the allegations that was put forward by James Noko in his emails, to say that in the top brass of the PIC, you've got the chairman, and then you've got the CFO, and then you've got a non-executive director. Chairman being Gungubele, the CFO, who was then acting CEO, being Matsepo More, and the non-executive director being Sizwe Zulu. Sizwe Zulu is a live-in lover of Lawrence Mdluli. And now James Noku alleges that for anyone to have their transactions taken care of by the PIC, attended to by the PIC, you can put your submission through, but what will happen is that the trio is going to send you to Lawrence Mdluli, who's going to negotiate the shareholdings and things like that. These are these are James Noku's allegations, right? Now, what you have to take a closer look at is that the PIC tried to find a close relationship, friendship relationship with Dr. Dan and Dr. Survey of Segunjalo. Yes. Now, they had a hard time trying to find that, because, as it came out from the evidence there, they have a professional relationship. Meanwhile, Lawrence Mdluli went and told the PIC that, yes, he and Sizwe Zulu are live-in lovers.
And they admitted that to the media, that they, in fact, some would say, were in cohorts.
I wouldn't really go that far, but, I would say he went and told them that. Yes. But now he's also got several dealings with the PIC. He's got several transactions that are funded by the PIC.
Hundreds and millions of rands worth of transactions, yeah.
Which is very suspicious.
We can call it suspicious, but again, I'm really coming to say that the PIC didn't interrogate that. The PIC didn't give these guys a chance to clarify, to dispel all the allegations against them, or they didn't interrogate them deep enough to find out if these allegations are actually true.
In fact,
either way.
In fact, I'm sorry to cut you there. In fact, Jill Marcus apologized to Lawrence Mdluli.
Jill Marcus apologized
when he was crying.
Your stuff is coming into.
When Lawrence Mdluli was crying, giving his testimony, Jill Marcus, the former governor of the South African Reserve Bank, apologized.
Yeah, she did.
To Mdluli, yes.
It was one of those interesting things. But the key thing here is that I think when they decided to take out that 1 week, they had to take a look at which direction they were going. Yeah, and to say maybe we're going in the right direction, maybe we're not. It is really what they were thinking.